in the last session we actually saw how the attacker could basically get access to the IP address, right. So, we are going to see more tools that is actually available in Kali Linux as part of the reconnaissance effect subsequently to whatever we saw in the previous session. So, HT-Track is actually a tool that is built into Kali Linux. So, the idea why this tool is actually present, the main objective is that using this tool one can actually get a complete copy of the website available downloaded onto the person's desktop machine. It will basically have the entire copy of the website available, all the pages and sub pages in it, so that once it is actually downloaded and made available offline, there could be a more detailed analysis done on the contents of the web pages for the attacker to get more details on potential loopholes that could actually be leveraged on for the final attack. Also, having the copy of the website locally by the attacker would also help the attacker to sort of develop what is referred to as a fake phishing website, which by which the attacker could potentially sort of mislead the actual end user of the particular website to making him think that it is really the actual website that he has really entering the details of it as compared to a fake website, right. So, for example, let us say that we are all used the website of a very common bank like let us say ICICI Bank. Now, we all know the website for ICICI Bank is www.icicibank.com. Now, what exactly is referred to as a phishing website is that an attacker with an objective of trying to get the user credentials for a customer of ICICI Bank will actually develop a website which will be exactly resembling that of the original ICICIbank.com, but will not be the same ICICIbank.com, right. So, because when you will normally find that when the name of the domain is very large, right, and it is not a very small name, it will be very difficult for a normal human eye to find out that one letter in that entire name is missing and thereby it is actually a different name. So, for example, instead of in this particular example, instead of ICICIbank.com, if the attacker had actually registered a domain called as ICICbank.com, it is going to be very difficult for the end user to realize that there is one letter I that is missing, but unfortunately it is turning out to be a completely a different domain name altogether, right. So, when the user clicks on this particular phishing website which is not the actual domain name, the user will be given the look and feel of the original website itself in order to ensure that the user does not get a feeling that he has actually landed somewhere else. So, the attacker would actually be making use of this particular facility of downloading the entire website onto his local machine to view it in an offline manner, so that a very similar looking website could potentially be also developed for luring the very innocent end user by making him give all his credentials for the attacker to basically compromise and then leverage on. So, how do we actually try to have this HT-Track installed if it is not already available as part of your Kali Linux distribution is that you could just do a sudo apt-get install HT-Track on your system, and then you will actually have this particular HT-Track package installed on your system. So, we will basically see a very small demo of how this particular HT-Track actually works. So, I invoke the command by giving the name HT-Track, and as soon as I give it I am asked to enter a project name for it. So, I just call it as demo, then I basically specify I am asked to specify what is the path in which the downloaded website is actually got to be stored, right. So, I could actually store it in any path that I basically want. So, the default is actually taken whatever is actually specified there if the user is not specifying any path, and then I am asked to enter the URL. Suppose if I basically type the URL or whatever site I want to create a mirror copy or a local copy of the entire contents, I basically give that URL name, and then there are various options that is given there. So, I say that I choose option 4 for mirroring all the links in the URLs, and then I also specify if I have any proxy through which this particular thing is going to be accessed. Then the next parameter that I give here is very important, where I specify what are the different URL files that has to be downloaded and made a offline copy of, right. So, I could give any wildcard here. So, I could just say star, or if I am very interested only in the images, I just say star.gif or star.img or whatever it is, or if I am interested in actually taking the complete copy of it, I just use the wildcard character star and then mention that as my wildcard character in this particular option, right. And if there are any other options, I basically specify that, and then finally I am also told by the command what is the exact command line arguments that has actually been entered, that is going to be used for execution right now. So, that the next time I want to run the same download, I do not need to necessarily go through this wizard, but I could just actually execute the command line directly, right. And then it finally asks for a final confirmation of whether the command could actually be launched, and then it starts actually downloading the contents from that particular URL that has actually been mentioned there, right. So, after it is actually downloaded for some time, you will find that you will be able to see all the contents actually available as part of the directory called demo, because demo was the name of the project that was actually given for this invocation of httrack. You find the whole thing listed here under the demo directory. So, the next type of protocol that is typically used attempted for getting more details is the ICMP protocol. So, as we had actually learned before in our previous IS3 level, so ICMP is a protocol that is typically used for network management and troubleshooting, right. So, we talked about two different very popular applications based on ICMP protocol called ping and traceroute when we were talking about the networking portion in IS3, and these two applications are typically available by default in all the operating systems that one encounters in today's world, right. So, you would actually have them available mandatorily in pretty much all the operating systems today, right. So, both the applications ping and traceroute actually make use of this ICMP protocol underneath, and penetration testing with these tools is little bit difficult in today's world, because most of the high security systems typically have disabled ICMP protocol whenever the ICMP protocol is actually initiated from outside their network, right. And even if it is actually enabled, the firewalls which are typically installed, whether it is be a hardware firewall or a software firewall, are capable of getting alerted immediately if it finds that it is actually getting a lot of ICMP messages, whether it be through ping or through traceroute application within a certain configured threshold period of time, which will alert it on a possible attack that is going to happen, and thereby that particular IP address from which the ICMP requests are coming will be immediately disabled, right. So, in today's world, because of the paranoia that is associated by the administrators on enabling ICMP, it is very difficult for a penetration tester to get details about any kind of details in the target environment with ICMP. But if at all there is a response that is actually received from the tool, we can sort of infer, the attacker can infer that the target is sort of alive, but if there is no response, then there is a possibility that either the ICMP is blocked before it reaches the target, or the target itself is possibly currently down in the network. So, that is basically the possibilities that could happen if you actually try to make use of these two ICMP based application. Now, the DNS reconnaissance, we did actually see very briefly about ARIN in our last session. So, as we know, the DNS is basically a protocol that is actually used for converting a host name to an IP address. So, we have actually talked about it in our previous IS3 course. So, it basically gives me the necessary information for the as a penetration tester for mapping the system and the subdomain. So, now what exactly do we call a subdomain, right? Now, if you for example try to access google.com, you actually get the web page corresponding to doing a web search, right. But if you for example type mail.google.com, right, it actually takes you to Gmail. Now, mail is a subdomain under google.com. So, that is basically what is referred to as a subdomain. So, some of the other very common subdomains that is typically employed are, I could have a file.domain name, I could have a mail.domain name, right, and so on and so forth. Now, for a penetration tester, one of the first things that he will actually have to find out is, after the domain name has actually been found out, what are all the different subdomains within that domain name that it has actually been registered with, so that it basically gives the next level of information for the penetration tester. So, DNS by the nature of the protocol basically responds to queries. So, which is potentially made use of by the attacker by giving him a list of words to the DNS server to get the corresponding list of IP addresses, right. This is something that is extremely time consuming task, but there are also tools that are actually available to do the automation, right. So, let us see a couple of tools called dig and fierce. Now, with a dig I could actually do a query of a DNS server directly, where I can basically go ahead and specify what is the particular name that I am basically wanting details of, and what is the corresponding DNS server on which it is actually registered. So, if you see here, for example, I have lot of details about that particular server that is actually made available as part of the response here. Now, it basically starts telling me what is the OS from which I have actually run this particular command, and then what kind of header details is actually used for sending, and then it gives me some details in the answer section about that particular server. So, for example, it tells me what is the TTL value that is actually used for the validity of this particular DNS registration and so on, right. So, and it also tells me what is the amount of time that the query has actually taken, and from what server it has actually got a response, when it has been responded, when it has been actually queried and so on, right. Now, with this I get some amount of detail on this particular server details, but I will be able to do a lot of automated subdomain analysis with a tool called as fierce, right. Now, this particular fierce tool is actually available as part of Kali Linux, and it is under the information gathering menu item under the submenu item of DNS analysis. So, we will just see how this particular fierce actually works. So, if I basically try to find out where is this particular fierce tool, you will find that it is in user bin fierce. Now, if I try to run the command and give a particular URL to it, saying dns.casc.ufl.edu, it basically tries to find out what are all the different domains that is actually listed, subdomains that is listed under this particular domain name. Now, if you see here, it basically tells you that it is actually performing 2280 test, right. Now, what is this 2280 is that if I go inside this particular file and then take a look, the fierce.file, there is a particular file that is actually made use of called host.txt, right. So, where is this particular file? It is under user share fierce. So, /user/share/fierce/host.txt, right. Now, what is there in this particular file is that it basically contains a list of around 2280 different typical host names that is actually used. Now, let us go inside this particular file and then see, right. Now, if you see here, there is 2280 lines in this particular file host.txt, and that is basically what is also getting reported here. So, now what fierce is going to do here is that it is actually going to go through all these patterns that is there, one pattern in every line of this particular file, and then find out for that particular domain name that has actually been given as an argument to this particular script, whether is there a subdomain that is registered. If it basically finds a particular subdomain that is registered, it is going to list me here, right. Now, this gives an attacker an advantage of basically trying to find out what are all the different subdomains that are registered under a given domain name very easily, right. So, it is going to take a long time for it to complete, because it has to actually run 2280 different tests on this particular domain name, but the time that this tool is actually taking to run basically gives an advantage to the developer, to the attacker, or quickly finding out what are the specific subdomains that is registered within the particular given domain name very easily, right. So, with this particular detail, the attacker would basically have the complete subdomain registrations on a particular domain along with the IP address with which it has been registered also. And then there is a tool called Nmap, which is basically standing for a network mapper. This tool is actually used for scanning the host and the services on a particular network. So, Nmap has basically got very advanced features that can detect different applications that are running on different systems, as well as what kind of services and the OS versions that are really running on each of those, right. So, Kali Linux comes loaded with an application called ZenMap, and this ZenMap is nothing but Nmap tool running in the background with a graphical user interface that is actually available to run the different commands. So, we will actually be seeing Nmap example as part of some of the more complicated tools that we will be seeing subsequently in our future sessions as part of the penetration testing. Thank you.